want to make sure that, you know, he purchased this property with the intent of using it as it is zoned. As far as, I talked about the no harm to public interest, again, we are going to take every effort of, obviously, we've already done wetland impact studies, we've already looked at all the setback requirements. There's significant erosion and sediment control measures that we will take to make sure that there is no other impacts. There is many other homes along there that are right up against the river. And I just think by looking at it as a cumulative, that's very not fair to this parcel owner. Yep.
Have there been any homes with similar situations granted variances in the last decade that have that issue?
I am not sure.
Are you thinking, because a lot of homes were built before we even had zoning and so on, so
Yep.
did you actually look at recent activity? Are you telling us that maybe we've granted variances in similar situations?
I'm not sure if, no, I am just making the point, I believe DNR, I heard the DNR letter for the first time just a few minutes ago. You know, it was basically claimed that the driveway and home is going to create additional runoff to the river. And, you know, you do have already homes that are being built along the bluff line. You have the Eklund, what is it, Eckberg, the new park is being built on the bluff line. I mean, there's several, you know, there is development along the bluff line, and all of them, you know, well, I know at the park and our property will take every, you know, measure needed as far as to controlling erosion along that bluff line. As far as, I'm not sure if there was any other technical, I mean, again, the only pinch point and only area that we are disturbing the slopes is right in this area. Slopes greater than 25 is just right in this pinch point area. Other than that, we stay out of the 25% slopes. Is there anything else? I'm trying to think if there's any other questions from a technical standpoint. If not, I will turn that over. I will be here. Thank you.
Super. My name is Rich Packinen, and I'm the owner of GB Investments, LLC, so I'm the owner of the farm. And I'm not going to reiterate the points that Angela just articulated, but I'll tell you a little bit about the story about why we own this property, perhaps, and our intended use of it. So I'm also the owner of another farm about 4 miles north of this, and we've planted 2,000 apple trees. And so we're learning to be we're learning how to grow apples for cider. And so I've invested in this area. My business is in St. Paul. I'm an urban real estate owner, developer. That is my core business. I purchased this property with the intention of this being a family cabin and an extension of that orchard that we've started just north of this property. And so that's why we invested in this property. And that 40-acre parcel, that land, that location of that housing site that you see there, this road, you know, when you talk about hardship, if we can't pull the driveway through this corner, there's no other ability to access that 40 acres at all, right? That's the rest of the area, the slope access to it, what have you. So when we talk about alternative locations on the site, it's definitive from that tax parcel that's on that corner. So that particular piece of property is completely inaccessible but for this driveway, or a driveway similar to this, right? Or another driveway in another location where we're disturbing more of the slope of that bluff line. So we chose this location not because it was the easiest way through. We chose this location because it offered the least amount of impact. And so when we talk about alternative access routes, you know, have been denied or have been turned down, it's turned down because they're more disruptive. And so our intent to buy this site was to put a family cabin here, spend a lot of time here with my daughters, and you know, enjoy what this parcel is. The second point I want to identify, listening to the DNR's comments and listening to the staff's comments, there's a number of references to the harm done associated with the 2,200-foot long driveway. This particular piece of property was for sale for probably 2 years before we bought it. And there's a lot of conversation in the area about conservation, preservation, you know, land use, really preserving open spaces in this area. And this land, public had there's a lot of opportunity for other organizations to be able to buy this land. This land is fabulous development land. And I'm a little surprised that a land developer didn't buy this. You know, our intended purpose to use this as a family cabin, use it as in recreation, for farming, what have you, is an excellent conservation use. And so the disturbance, when you think about a driveway coming through 300 acres, or the construction of one house, similar to if you look at the map, there's a whole series of houses going north from this property, parcel by parcel by parcel, along the St. Croix. So constructing a house similar to all the houses that are north of this, and in doing so, preserving this land, you know, in an open space manner, is a pretty interesting and beneficial environmental outcome as compared to the alternatives. And so I don't know how else to approach, you know, what other alternatives to use to find another way to, you know, constructing on this site than what we presented. And I'd also, in talking about the issue of no harm to public interest, please take a look at the thoroughness of the information we've presented to you. I will always, I'm a rule follower. We follow the rules. We do our best to be responsible in, you know, in the projects that we pursue, and the quality of the information that's been presented to you. You know, we didn't run roughshod over the rules. We didn't come in and say, hey, let's just knock down this little bit of slope with a tractor and pretend it wasn't there. You know, we're not trying to circumvent any rules or public policy, but rather we're approaching it with the best experts we can hire, and approaching it in a completely transparent manner, so we can have, you know, a debate about the nuances of what's here. So our argument is that there is a hardship. This land can't be used without this driveway. We've approached this in the most responsible manner we can, the least impactful manner we can, and I think in larger context, this is a good outcome for this larger piece of property. So, thank you. You guys have any questions for me?
No, this is not a St. Croix Riverway case, because this property is entirely outside of the Riverway.
Thank you, sir.
So this board is evaluating it just the same as it would, let's say, a piece of property that overlooked Perch Lake or Bass Lake or any other water body in St. Croix County.
Okay, thank you.
This family cabin would be a year-round structure, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, similar to the ones to the north, as you say.
Exactly, and it would be done in complete compliance with all rules, regulations, wetland issues, you know, on and on and on. I mean, we're not going to do anything that causes harm. That's not why we're here.
Nothing illegal.
No,
and what you'd like to do on the rest of the property is, where suitable, to plant apple trees, am I hearing?
Well, we hope. Now, the 2,000 trees that I planted on that farm to the north, I probably lost half of them last year to drought and deer and
Yeah, it's tough.
fire blight, and so I'm learning how to be a farmer. So presuming I can actually find myself to being a successful farmer, that would be the goal. But that's a big presumption at this point.
Yeah, no conservation easements involved.
And no, sir.
No. All right, I think are you able to come back when we reconvene?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see if we can squeeze in one more person who wants to speak in favor of this. Is there
Thank you.
somebody in the room who wants to speak in favor? Well, let's try somebody else then. Anybody else want to speak? All right, assuming you've already signed in?
Yeah.
If you're both going to say the same things, you might as well step up together. And, you can just nod when the other one says it. We can't make decisions based on numbers and popularity contests and stuff like that. Anyway,
My name is Jane Wickelman, and we're one of the adjacent property owners. And the concern that we have is the hill is full of springs that flow down into the river. And even a retaining wall isn't going to change when the natural flow of all the water comes down that hill. Where is it going to end up when it hits the retaining wall? Is it going to go north or south? And that whole piece on the bottom from that bay floods when the water is high. That whole thing floods the back way in. And our neighbors can attest to that because their driveway has been totally underwater when that floods. And when we built our home in '82, they told us we had to be back 200 feet from the high water mark, which we did. And we were just, in the last few years, we're told by someone from here that we had to remove a chicken coop and some sheds that were in line with our home because they said they were in the 500-year floodplain. So we're concerned with the runoff, we're concerned with the driveway, the corner, the hill that the driveway will come out on is very steep, and it's very hard to manipulate in the winter. A lot of people don't even make it up it, and if somebody were coming out and somebody were coming up, we have concerns with that. We know that change is inevitable, and we don't want to deny anyone any right to have a home or a cabin, but we do have concerns with the watershed and all the springs along that hill and where they're going to end up when they hit a retaining wall. Is it going to end up flooding more of our land and the neighbor's land and Jim and Linda Kuchar's land? So we're really not in favor of it.
My name is Robert Wickelman, and my family has been on that property since 1915, and I know the area really well. And that whole works down in that lower part floods every year when the water raises. And that whole area from where they want to build their driveway all the way down to Kuchar's land is all springs. And that's a natural runoff through there. For all the water in the springtime, it all runs down through that whole area.
all right, point noted. We will reconvene sometime after 12:30. It'd probably be closer to,
Thank you.
let's see, yes, thank you. And if you're able to be here when we reconvene, you'll be able to hear the rest of what goes on. Should we try to do it without lunch, Dave? You're not going to have a chance to eat, are you?
I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah, I won't either. So let's reconvene at 12:30. Okay, we'll just stand in adjournment here until 12:30. 12:32 according to the clock on the wall, and Mr. Peterson has returned from his other meeting, so we can resume. See, we had the Wickelmans talking, and you were finished, Mr. Wickelman, were you? Yep. Okay. Does anybody else wish to address the board? Yes, ma'am? Identify yourself and your address, please, and
Okay, I am
take it from there.
Patty Ginter, and we're right next to the property that's being discussed here, 2082. Is that our new address? We just moved there in November. So,
Oh,
I guess one cabin doesn't make that big of a difference to me, but I'm concerned about what's going to happen to the rest of the property, and I just don't want a busy road going behind us with a lot of noise, because it's very quiet and peaceful where we are right now. And I guess that's one of my main concerns. And then we've also been talking about the natural springs. And I know that University of Wisconsin River Falls, somebody had asked to come on our property, and they were testing the water there because they wanted to know how all the new houses going in was affecting the water in that area, and also the quality and such. So I don't know what they had found out. I didn't do my homework, and I didn't research that before this, but I know it is a concern. I guess at this point, I'm not favorable to the variance until I maybe know a little more about what the rest of the 300 acres is going to be. And I guess I'd be surprised if that land was even buildable, just because of the problems my parents had building their house there, which is part of the scenic riverway. It's just odd that ours is, and then the property right next to us is not. So, okay, that's it. Say that again?
and you speak for Mr. Aker also, right?
Yes,
Ginter, oh,
I did design the sheet.
all right, we respect that, yep, okay. Anybody else wish to speak? Ms. Poppenhagen, did you want any rebuttal? Did you wish to respond to the points that were made by the Wickelmans or the Ginters?
Can I say one more thing?
Certainly, Mr. Packinen.
So again, my name is Rich Packinen. There's a lot of points again that were raised about like the springs, the traffic, and what have you. I would ask the board to please consider the information that we've submitted and the thoroughness of that, and that issues like springs, traffic count, access issues, what have you, we're not going to proceed with any construction that isn't fully vetted, fully researched, and fully approved, by the right authorities. So those concerns that have been raised are very valid and are issues that we will study and make sure that we're constructing. If we're granted the ability to granted this variance, that we'll construct that work in a manner that takes all of that into account professionally. Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
I do have a question. You're going to put in a driveway 11 feet wide, is that correct?
12.
I believe it's 12
12.
feet. I believe it's 12. Is that and I believe that's the minimum, right? 12 feet? Yes.
12, okay. And it's going to be 2,200 feet long, is that correct?
I understand that, yes.
What is there right now? Is there a walking trail, or is it just growing up, or what's there now?
Well, I mean, it's vegetated, but what was there historically was a roadbed. I mean, this was a roadbed, albeit it wasn't necessarily a driveway, but it's been an active cut roadbed that's been driven on and used for years, and that roadbed comes through the property, and then from here it goes all the way up the bluff, up onto the top. So that was, and that's been there for, I don't even know, I mean, decades and decades and decades. So
My
we're
question-
following the same route as that roadbed.
My question is, if you put a road like that in, how can that not increase runoff a lot?
That's, I don't know the answer to that. Angela, would you answer that question? That's a great question.
Well, yes, once it'll be a gravel surface, but also as part of the requirements, right now we're just, doing the variances. We will have to come through with a land use permit, and at that point, we will do stormwater management ponds, erosion control, all of that to address the stormwater runoff, to make sure that it's not any greater than the pre-existing conditions that we do on all of our plans. And that is a requirement of the county and DNR.
I don't know. It seems to me that it's obvious it's going to create a tremendous amount of runoff, increased. And I understand the efforts that you hope to make, but I don't know.
I suppose you're thinking in terms of the additional space that would be needed for the rain gardens and other surface water management ideas, huh, Dave? Yeah. Well, there are ways to deal with that. The staff have the expertise to evaluate engineering studies that will have to be submitted, just like the ones for the highway. The road work in Holton that we looked at earlier, there'll be those calculations that are done for the various kinds of severity of the storms and the snow runoff and when the ground is frozen and when it's not. We hope they get it right, but of course, it's an additional expense, and they've got to use some land in order to infiltrate the water. Yes, duly noted. Anybody, anything else? Otherwise, we're at the stage where I would close the hearing, and then we'd have no more testimony from the public or the applicant or the engineers, and we'd just be dialoguing with the staff, who are not our employees, but are provided by the county for the use of the Board of Adjustment in matters like this. Oh, yeah. Should I go ahead and close the hearing? You're not going to ask one of the applicants for evidence? All right. I'll declare the hearing closed then. It's 12:40 now. Okay, Dave, we're in the discussion phase.
I think that we need to remind ourselves about these rules and regulations that have been in place, some of them for quite some time, some of them not. And it's not a willy-nilly thing. These are serious considerations, and I acknowledge all of the comments that have been made both by the county staff and by the applicant and in trying to control things, but it's better to prevent things than to work after the fact. And I just have some concerns. We're violating the setback, and setbacks are in place for a reason and they're important, and I just have some issues. And I understand the whole idea of the Board of Adjustment is to consider and what the applicant is presenting, but
Okay, thank you. I do have a question for Mr. Wozniak or Ms. Denzer. The 12-foot minimum driveway width is a function of a county ordinance. And I'm sure it wasn't, 12 feet wasn't picked randomly out of the air, but the typical fire truck, if I remember right, is no more than 10 feet wide. Why was 12 chosen? Well, let me, I guess, there's no point in the question unless we have something we could do about it. I take it we could, upon a proper application, grant a variance from the width of the driveway at the pinch point, if we framed things in that way. So that leads me to ask, why should it be 12 feet along its whole length?
I'll speak to that. Certainly, there would be the opportunity to consider a exception to that width standard. Typically, the width standards for driveways, it's taking into account emergency vehicle access, as you alluded to with a fire truck, which often would be a bigger vehicle than, say, even an ambulance. But also for two vehicles to pass, you don't want to be backing up 2,200 feet. So, sometimes that can be addressed with a bump out wider part of a driveway if it's an especially long driveway. But yes, I mean, it's typically, different jurisdictions have different standards. Here we have 12 feet. I worked for a number of years for a county that had a 14-foot minimum width. So they're not all the same, all uniform. But the reason is for safety, for accessibility, and especially for emergency response.
Well, then Ms. Denzer.
I would just add that with my long tenure with St. Croix County, that this has come up sometimes in discussion, and we actually have had this, what has come up has been these extremely long driveways and emergency services, getting down them, getting back up them, being able to turn around, having steep slopes issues, and they're generally, if we did not require it at this because we are going to recommend denial, but in other situations, we sometimes have put the caveat on, you must talk to the local emergency services provider, and they do have the authority to object to driveways. And we did not ask that because this was for a variance. Could they put in a wider one? As Mike said, there's ways to deal with it, but we, at this point, have not had the support to change our regulations. Do we think 2,200 feet is too long for a driveway? Generally, yes, we would agree with that. The county used to have a limit for cul-de-sacs that was strictly enforced of only 1,200 feet. So if a road can't be longer than 1,200 feet, why would you want driveways going back thousands of feet? So these are considerations, but they were not on the table today, really, not heavily, because it didn't meet, in our opinion, the criteria for variances. So.
Yeah, well, I'm, despite all I've heard, speaking for myself only, I'm strongly motivated to go with the staff recommendation here. I think the strongest argument is the unique property limitations argument, but the burden of proof is on an applicant to meet all three of the criteria. And I certainly don't think that there's an overwhelming case being made by the applicant with respect to the unnecessary hardship argument either, in that there is apparently at least one other site on this 315 acres that could have a home on it. It's not up to us to provide ways that they can have multiple homes on a piece of land. And I guess Mr. Nickum maybe said in a way what I would with regard to such a long driveway and a wall, and despite our best efforts, the likelihood that there be some erosion, bank stabilization. Now we've got some talk about springs. I guess other cases in the past have had springs. In Somerset, I remember I think it's by Twin Springs boat launch area along there. People had water basically coming in their basements because of water coming through the rocks. Tentatively speaking, I'm pretty well opposed to this. How about you, Mr. Peterson?
Guess I agree with both of your comments, and just to, hopefully not to oversimplify, I just haven't seen enough data or argument that would cause me to consider overriding the ordinance as stated. So I would vote against it also.
Mr. Wozniak or Ms. Denzer, could you just amplify a little bit more? What is it that justifies the 5-foot minimum setback for a driveway from a neighbor's property? Is that just to allow the neighbor to have things 5 feet away also from their side, so there's a total 10-foot separation between things? Is that what we're getting at?
Choices on requirements to set back driveways from a property line do vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Often there's different reasons. It gives a little bit of area to manage stormwater runoff off from the driveway. Snow storage, if you're plowing it and pushing snow, at least you've got some place to put it on your property as opposed to pushing it onto your neighbor's property. And also sometimes there's some grading needed as you're fitting the driveway surface into the landscape. So those are typically the reasons.
I suppose there's fallen trees, some place to put the wood, huh?
Yes. Hey, there are some jurisdictions that do not require setbacks for driveways. They let them go right up to a property line, but I don't think that's advisable, but you know, that does occur. But in our case, we do have that 5 foot.
Those that have 0 setbacks tend to be more urban settings, don't they? That's quite common in a city, isn't it? That you might have a driveway right up to the property line.
Correct.
At one time, the county used to allow common driveways shared by 2 homes, was it, or 3 homes? What's the county's posture on that now?
We still allow that, but usually what happens there is we ask for a maintenance agreement, and that is another reason, in addition to the very excellent ones Mike mentioned, is that just visually with your eye, you can't always tell exactly for a property owner, where's my line, where's your line? And that 5 foot does give each person a little, enough of a give that hopefully as driveways, things can shift over time, they're not encroaching on each other's property. So that's another reason. We don't see it as much anymore, but when the standards were probably put in place, there's probably also a consideration that a lot of, and there still are quite a few out there, property lines are not always completely accurate. You know, surveys and everything make them more accurate, but and then nowadays surveys make them a great deal more accurate, but there was a time when even having the 5 foot might not mean that your driveway was not, happened to be in the wrong spot. So there's many very good reasons for it from a rural, county-wide perspective, which is how we regulate.
I have another question. Do you have a recollection of this board having waived the 25% slopes since our modern, or since our current ordinance for a situation like this, for a driveway?
Well, the current ordinance, been in place since, what, the end of 2019? Chapter 15.
I believe Chairman Malik is referring to the concept of how long we've had that particular standard, even in previous versions of our zoning, that the 25% or greater slope. No, I don't think we've waived that, not over this long of an area especially. This 300, or I believe it's, how many feet? 100?
300 some, I guess, for the retaining wall?
355 feet, that especially, that distance is not, in my recollection, we have not made that. Maybe a little bit here and there, not less than 50, because we don't measure less than 50, but, but not to my recollection. And we've had that standard in since, I believe, pre-2006, but I could be wrong on that.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Ben Hetzel, who worked on this review, would like to make a remark.
I just want to clarify that measurement, that 355.9 isn't the length of the retaining wall. It's the length of the slope as we measure it perpendicular to the contours.
From the base
So,
to the top.
yeah. So it's the length of the slope, not the length of the retaining wall.
Oh, what's the length of the retaining wall? 100 feet. Oh, that
Thank you.
makes quite a difference, yeah.
There are areas where steeper slopes, if it's less than a 50-foot stretch, where the grading can occur.
Sure.
So there's even probably another point with this driveway where that would be the case, where it would be going through a sloped area, but it's less than 50 foot of width that's being disturbed. Or the slope is less, the steep slope is less than 50 in that area.
Did you have a point, Dave?
No, I was just going to agree about the driveway. You ever see where somebody drives around a mud puddle and they keep moving over?
Yeah, this is going to be gravelled though, so at least for the first 10 years, it should be pretty obvious what's on and what's off.
Yeah, but I know that happens, so,
Yeah.
not so much anymore with blacktop, but it does happen with gravel.
Inevitably, when we talk about an area of property being not buildable because you can't get access to it, people wonder, well, then why did I pay all this money for this lot? Is the county just taking away from me the value of my property? We had a notable case on that one that we litigated over and over again, and finally prevailed on it. Even for an unbuildable piece of land, there are multiple uses. So it's not like people are being deprived of everything. Well, anyways, I don't want to pontificate anymore. You're probably tired of it. Are we ready for a motion and a decision here? Okay. Do you want me to make it, or do one of you want to make it?
You word it.
Yeah, then I move that we deny the applications, all of them, or both of them, on the basis that the staff has outlined here, and we adopt the staff's findings of fact, conclusions of law, and ultimate decision. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, further discussion of it? Okay, all in favor should vote aye. Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed should vote nay. All right, it is a unanimous decision to deny the application. Sorry, it's painful, but that's it. Now, do we have some other stuff that we should be talking about pertaining to the next meeting?
I, what's that? Okay. Yeah. We, for the next agenda, I could just give you a brief, we have a couple applications. We have, we're anticipating a conditional use permit for St. Croix National Golf and Events Center for some improvements that they're proposing. They have a variety of things they're working on, and this would be part of what they're proposing. Golf clubhouse expansion, golf cart storage building, and some other site improvements. We have, now I'm drawing a blank on our other item. Julie, remind me, our other item?
The Lindis.
Oh, yes. We have a CUP, I think there's 2 CUPs involved, for a home in the town of Troy, dwelling site in the town of Troy on Salishan Drive. And so, again, that would be Riverway requirements within the town of Troy.
Did you say there are CUPs with regard to the golf course?
Yes, there would be a CUP for expansion, modification of the St. Croix National Golf Clubhouse. They have an area that they're expanding. They use simulators for practicing golf indoors, and so we're talking about 5,000 square feet plus being added on. They also have a golf cart storage building that would have sort of a pavilion area, again in the range of 5,000 square feet of building space, and some additional parking. And they're doing proposing some renovations of their event center, but not really any changes to the footprint or general aesthetics. More renovating the space. But we take into consideration the parking needs and stormwater, any stormwater impacts. The other thing I'd mention regarding the St. Croix National is they do have some other plans that they're not proposing for now, but of reopening a ski snowboard area there, the former Snowcrest. Yeah, but I don't want to get into that because that's not on next month's.
The CUPs will pertain to disturbing slopes?
In this case, no, shouldn't be disturbing slopes. It's just because of the use it's required under general zoning.
Are you expecting significant public involvement in either of these matters next month?
I don't, on the St. Croix National, I mean, it's, there may be people curious, interested in what they're doing. It's an existing use, and it's part of it's really very related to their existing use. So I'm not anticipating a lot of fanfare, but we never know for sure. On the property in Troy, well, we can't be certain if there will be interest from agencies or public.
So we've got a date
We will have one other item too.
Oh,
It'll
pardon.
be either in February or in March. We're working on it right now. But a conditional use permit that we've had extensive complaints and violations on that we want to bring in for your reconsideration.
No further business? Well, you chose not to invoke the 5-page thing on the town's URL. Is that because their application was,
The five-page limit?
the 5-page summary thing? Because did they predate that rule of ours, or
Well,
productive for some reason? It sure did burn up a lot of pages of the package.
they've been working with us for a long time on it, so that may be we'll take responsibility on the staff to hold everyone's feet to the fire on that going forward. Yes.
Inapplicable facts. Well, all right, I think we're done with 103, huh?
We ask for a 5-page summary on these CUPs now.
Within the ordinance?
What's that?
Is that in the